Yes, a very warm welcome to Zoom in Africa. It's Monday. This is Meet the CEO segment. Glad you could join us yet again for an informative show. My name is Florence Ndongo. Karibu sana.
And I am Henry Maina, and we are more than glad that you could make a date with GBS once again as we deliberate about business and what it entails within the business sector. Today, it's all about books.
Well, writing is an art and one of the oldest form of expressing one's opinion or message to an audience. But there is a whole process involved before the message can get to the end consumer.
Yes, and despite the country having remarkable writers, authors, and publishers, it is estimated that Kenyans who have a reading culture range between 1 to 3 million out of the possible 40 million. We are not the judges, you are the judge.
Word Alive publishers have so far identified the problem and are now in the business to actually solving it. The company publishes books based on fiction to encourage children to read and at the same time to improve on their grammar.
Right now it has been quite a long journey. For 24 years, over 250 types of books have been published and approved by KIE to be used in Kenya primary school syllabus. Among the publishers behind this venture are Word Alive publishers, but we'll be getting to know of what it actually entails, because we understand there are two types of publishing. There is the educational publishing and the trade publishers, and Word Alive is actually in trade publishing. Thank you so much. And we are joined by the managing director of Word Alive.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Okay. Maybe a brief introduction of who you are and your interest in books and how you actually came to think of now starting publishing as, can I say, as a career?
Well, I grew up with books, and my mom's sisters, the two younger sisters, who are not very old, much older than I am, were in high school when I was in primary school. They were in very good girls' schools. They were highly intelligent. We thought that really they were our role models. But what stood out for us is that they were very well spoken. And they used to scoop all their awards in schools. And they had this queer habit when they would close schools, they would come with their tomes, very large novels, that they would spend a day or two to read and finish, and then share these stories about distant adventures, escapades, drama, and all that.
Okay.
And that was really fascinating. And that sparked something in me and in my older brother. It set us on fire on reading. So we started reading fiction at a very early stage.
At what age are you particularly speaking about?
Well, I'm talking, first of all, is that I went to school at 7 years. You know, those years, we began school at 7 years. And we used to learn, through mother tongue for standard 1 to standard 3. And that system, the government is trying to reintroduce that system now. So I started learning English only in standard 4. So really, I was observing them all this time, but because I couldn't read English, I couldn't use English, I couldn't get a hang on these books. So it wasn't until standard 4 that I started getting into the habit of reading. So that must have been at the age of about 10 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me just, that sounds really nice.
Sure.
They always say that if you want to hide something from an African, then hide it in a book. They might never find it. And then here you are. Before I ask the question I want to ask, let me just know, reintroducing the system that you started with in school, are you for it or against it?
Well, there's a huge debate, pros and cons. Number one is because of the huge diversity. First of all, let's get to the facts. If you look at the most highly developed countries and the most advanced countries in terms of science, technology, arts, guess what they have in common for all of them? They use their indigenous languages as the language of instruction, as the language of learning, as the language of day-to-day communication, as the language for research, and all that. Because, and if you look at it, any part of the world, where they use indigenous languages, you look at the level of their progress, it's eons ahead. So that's a fact. That's because people tend to understand things without trying to figure out. I mean, I studied physics, for example, up to second year university. And even when you talk of an atom, up to today, I still have to figure out what that is. But perhaps if there was the word atom was in my own language, I would have no problem at all.
Okay.
And that ability to comprehend things at a deeper level is what leads to innovation, is what leads to creativity, to being more creative. So there's one sense in which I am for that debate. Now, the problem with a country like Kenya is, remember, Kenya is a conglomeration of very many nations, isn't it? That's why we are so diverse linguistically. Okay. We are like 42 languages. Yeah. Each one of them has several dialects. So the question is, if you go mother tongue, which, you see, and in any, if you come to Nairobi, for example, you may say the catchment language is Swahili. If you go to a Murang'a, you may say it's Kikuyu, but perhaps not, because it's quite cosmopolitan. Okay. I think those are some of the challenges. In some countries like South Africa, they have selected, say like 11 languages as the national languages. Okay. In Zimbabwe, they have selected 2 languages. The question is, what method do we select in Kenya without making some people come out as superior if you decide to select 1 or 2 languages?
Actually, I tend to agree, because I don't know what an atom is in my mother tongue, but I can, even in English, maybe if I was taught in my mother tongue, maybe I would know a bit. Because in English, the only thing I remember is that it's the smallest particle, blah, blah, blah. And that's it.
I know there's a whole debate surrounding it, because also I would kind of not go with it for so many other factors, bearing in mind the teachers that we have and actually how they're going to roll down to different counties, as you've said, on terms of the language to use. But also here you come in very handy as a publisher. The books that you do, and especially right now that we're talking about free primary education, and there are a lot of children going to school. Maybe a brief history of how you've seen this industry grow in your years of business.
First of all, is that publishing in Africa is almost synonymous to textbook publishing. Yeah. Publishing for educational purposes, for the classroom purposes, because when you look at Kenya, for example, and look at, and Kenya is far more advanced than many other African countries, you find that a concentration of publishers are in the educational sector. And it's primarily because that's where the numbers are, you see, and it is compulsory for everybody in the school system to read a textbook. And so everybody has gone in there. Now, when you look at what we call trade publishing, now trade publishing is publishing for the general reader, either for information, for leisure, like fiction, and for anything else except for instructional purposes. There are very few publishers who have gotten into that space. So in terms of development, we have seen an explosion of educational materials, simply because the numbers have continued to grow, especially from about 12 years ago with the introduction of free primary schooling and subsidized secondary schools. The numbers have basically ballooned, and that essentially means there is a requirement for more books. And so that the trajectory has been a growth trajectory. However, I am proud to say that I know when we were doing our own research on should we get into educational publishing, where we know we are guaranteed of numbers and money, big money and all that, or should we go to that space where almost no one nobody is offering that, or very few people are offering that, and provide at the quality that can stand anywhere in the world, provide global quality, strong content, well packaged, and as good as any Western book.